Hi everyone, welcome back to That's Mental. Welcome to another episode of Mental Health in the Brain and another episode in the series on trauma. Thank you so much for watching my previous video. I really hope you're enjoying it and finding it interesting. I'm really doing my best to break down these concepts for you and share everything that I've learned, so I hope it's helpful. So in today's video, I want to start to talk about the psychological impact of trauma. I've already touched upon this a little bit in my other videos, and today I'm going to dive into it in a bit more detail. So as I've explained before, basically when you experience a traumatic event, your brain perceives a threat and your survival mode, fight or flight response gets switched on. And this is basically your brain's way of protecting you. It's a survival response, survival mechanism. It's actually obviously really helpful. And this is what happens in the moment when you're going through something traumatic. And it doesn't matter if this is like a one-off event or a repeated event. Basically, this is just how your brain deals with it. So now we have to realize that when you've experienced a very traumatic event, not only do you have to deal with the fact that your brain is somehow protecting you from it, so it's switching on this survival response, which may, like I said, increase your fight or flight mode or even black out the event completely. But you also have to deal with the memories of the event, right? And obviously this is horrible because usually it's not something that you want to remember. So this is already something that you're going to be grappling with and dealing with mentally. It could be flashbacks, it could be just memories of the event that come to you at random moments, just things that you don't really want to think about. And obviously this has a huge impact on you psychologically. For example, think of the image that we often see in the media, which is that of war veterans having flashbacks of the war or situations that they've been in. This is actually a relatively accurate representation of how somebody might be dealing with a traumatic event, the memories of it, because essentially it's a moment in time that you're kind of trying to forget, but was so horrific that you basically can't. And when your survival response is triggered, the fight or flight mode, it could also come with this memory. So in the movies, they'll often show, people getting triggered by sounds of, let's say, like a plane flying over or gunshot sounds when we're thinking about war veterans. This could actually be the case for you. So for example, a certain sound associated with a negative memory, the memory of the trauma, might be a trigger and trigger this flashback. So basically, anyway, like I said, this hot-wired survival response that remains in you, plus the memories, are two really difficult things that you have to deal with and that are impacting your psyche. Also, I just want to reiterate something that I've said in previous videos, but just to say that your fight or flight, your survival mode response remains switched on all the time. And like I've explained, this is super strenuous for you, not just physically, but also mentally, because you're constantly hyper alert, hyper ready for danger. Again, whether you're aware of it or not, this is exactly what your brain is doing. It's preparing. It's like shit, could be in danger any moment, gotta be prepared. And this is extremely exhausting. So on top of that, which is already quite a lot for the psyche, there are all of the emotions that you're experiencing. Emotions and of course, associated thoughts that you are experiencing. So for example, it's quite common for trauma survivors to experience guilt or shame or even both. So it could be guilt that you've survived and somebody else didn't. It could be shame about the abuse that you've experienced, shame for getting in such a situation in the first place, and so on. But or you may also be doubting yourself, so this might look like maybe it was my fault, maybe I did something to provoke the situation. If I hadn't behaved like this, it wouldn't have happened. If I had behaved differently, it wouldn't have happened. So a lot of, these are a lot of really heavy feelings. I think all of us have experienced guilt and shame at a certain point in time. And it's something that's really heavy to sit with and kind of work through. So Again, this is just an extra layer on top of what I just described that you're having to deal with psychologically. Now, we're basically looking at 3 different layers or 3 different ways in which a person has been impacted psychologically by the events. You have the fight or flight mode protection mechanism / survival response. You have the hot-wired memory, the flashbacks, the triggers, etc., and permanently living in survival mode. And then you have the feelings of guilt, shame, and self-doubt and memories and all of this heavy stuff. And so what happens after the traumatic event actually makes it even worse. It's already bad enough having to go through something like that, but now you have to deal with all of these extra layers on top. And I want to take a moment here to emphasize that no matter the traumatic event that you've experienced, you are going to be affected by all of these. I tend to use examples that are very dramatic just to make it really clear what counts as a traumatic event and how this impacts people, because I think it's kind of easier for people to understand and relate the two. But even if you've experienced smaller events, all of these actually do elicit this response. So that's why it's really important to understand the impact that it has on you and how long lasting it can be. So I really hope that with this explanation, you're starting to put it together. And if you feel that you've experienced something traumatic to you, hopefully this is starting to kind of explain things and put some of the pieces of the puzzle together for you. Now, there's a 4th and even deeper layer that I want to talk about. And this is how you internalize certain behaviors and how you respond to them. Basically, it's what is often called a trauma response. And it's also related to how you internalize certain behaviors as normal. And this really deeply impacts your behavior, how you act around people, how you respond in certain situations. So in order to explain this, I want to use an example of physical abuse, whether that's sexual or violence. So basically what happens is, when you're repeatedly exposed to this kind of behavior, there comes a moment in time where you are so used to it that you start to internalize it as normal. And this is really problematic because at a certain point, you can't even tell that it's wrong anymore, right? So this means, for example, that you're so used to getting beat up when somebody is angry, or somebody behaving inappropriately with you sexually, that you've basically become numb to it and you start to question yourself, you start to doubt the reality. This is what I described with the self-doubt, and this is also something that we see in other mental health issues. You start to ask yourself, am I crazy? Have I been imagining it? Maybe this is normal. Maybe it's me, maybe I did something wrong. Like, just all of these questions start coming into your mind, and it makes it really hard to separate the reality from the messed up situation that you find yourself in. And obviously, as you start to doubt yourself, you start to lose confidence, or the lack of self-confidence induces the self-doubt. And obviously it becomes very problematic, because if you're in a situation like this, it makes it much harder for you to break free. But it also means that the abuser is the one that has control over you, because they know at a certain point that you're starting to doubt yourself, and they're almost it's almost as if they're counting on it, And it's the same with emotional abuse. So for example, if somebody is constantly criticizing you, or being very harsh, or just saying bad things about you, or the way you look, or the way you're acting, you just start to accept it as normal, and you start to accept that that's just how people treat you. And obviously this is really sad. No matter the example, it's really sad, not just because you internalize and accept this behavior. So it basically means that, like I said, the other person now has power and control over you, because you've just accepted that they're going to treat you like shit, and that's just how it is. And you internalize these behaviors as well, and it creates a future state, and that's also really sad. I just want to clarify, this is really important, that when I say accept, I don't mean that you are consciously accepting, like, okay, this person is treating me really badly. It just means that because it's happening so often, because it's just a situation that you have to deal with, that's what I mean by accepting. It's like just rolling it with it because there aren't any other options, because that's just what you're used to, because at a certain point you don't even see it anymore, you know. And this is also a coping mechanism, which is really important to realize. And what I mean by when I say it creates a future state is that because you learn to accept this behavior in the moment, because you internalize it as normal, it means that you will accept it from other people that you meet in the future. You will accept it from people you haven't even met yet, or you don't even know. But basically, this is your coping mechanism that you default to in this type of situation. And this is basically what they call the trauma response. The trauma response is a behavior that you have in a certain situation, a behavior that's a coping mechanism for you, that becomes second nature. And even though it's not really quote unquote normal, it's how you deal with someone else's inappropriate behavior. So let me give you an example. When I say it creates a future state, I can take the example of dating. Let's say we're using the example of emotional abuse. Somebody is constantly criticizing you and telling you, you know, speaking badly to you, basically, you know, telling you you're stupid, telling you you look like shitty, you know, telling you that you're badly dressed, you look like whatever, just negative talk, right? When you're dating, this means that when you meet a future partner, then if you meet a man who treats you like that and talks to you like that, you're just going to think it's normal. And you're just going to accept that behavior from him because you've become so used to that from whoever it was that was treating you that way that you don't, it's not that you don't realize that it's wrong, because I really think internally part of us does really deeply know that it's not right, but you just learn to roll with it. You think you can handle it, you kind of put up with it. And that's why it's so tragic, because it means that you allow, right, other people to behave with you in that way, even though they shouldn't, of course. And this is why trauma is so complex. Like, it's honestly such a deep and complex topic, and I really want to help people understand, because, you know, of course you don't want to be treated like that, but it comes from a really deep and dark place of having had to deal with such bad behavior for so long. So back to what I was saying that you've, you know, accepted this behavior. Like I said, I'm not at all suggesting that you're doing this consciously or that it means that you approve of these inappropriate behaviors. All I'm saying is it's a coping mechanism that's become ingrained in you and has developed over time. Of course, it's also, we have to understand, much easier to accept these behaviors, so to just roll with the punches, than it would be to be in this constant fight or flight survival mode, than it would be to constantly be in the struggle, constantly in the fight to try and you know, clash with the person, to break out against it. You know, imagine how exhausting that would be. It would be even more exhausting than it would be to just put up with the behaviors, right? So now we have 4 layers of impact of this trauma on your psyche. We have the fight or flight, protection, survival mode. We have the hot wired memory that's creating this permanent state of survival. We have the feelings of guilt, of shame, of self-doubt, and also, I forgot to mention earlier, we also have the memories that are replaying or that are somewhere in the background. And then we have these internalized behaviors that we've somehow accepted as normal, even though we know they're not. And the internalizing of these behaviors, like I explained, means that we just accept them as the norm from anybody that we meet in general. And this puts us in danger, like I explained, of repeating the loop with new people that we meet. And this is why it's just so complex and so dangerous, and also, in my opinion, really sad. And I'm not saying this at all with pity, because I feel like I've been there, but more just, it's very important for people to understand exactly where this is coming from. So for example, when people say, oh yeah, you know, like if, let's say a woman is with a man who is beating her, oh, why does she stay, or why does she go back? You have to understand that it's really difficult to break out of this pattern, because it takes such an incredible level of awareness of the situation, awareness of the behaviors of your own, of the other person's, awareness that you have to break the cycle. But I can say from experience that anybody who's in a really difficult situation and really stuck in that moment, it's very, very hard to see. So it's really important for us to understand how victims of abuse or whatever it is that they're experiencing are stuck in the traumatic moment, and it's very hard for them to break free. With that, I really hope that I've been able to explain the impact of trauma and how deep it runs. I know, like I said, it's a really complex topic, but I really hope that this is helping you understand. And I want to end this video by a quote by Bessel van der Kolk. He says, "For real change to take place, the body needs to learn that the danger has passed and to live in the reality of the present." I think this is a really beautiful quote, and in the next video I'm going to be going more into detail of the physical impact of trauma. So make sure you stay tuned for that one. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to like and subscribe and switch on notifications so that you know when the next one comes.